If you hold border security hostage to get tax cuts, you're playing Russian roulette with our national security. I'm saying that as we negotiate tax cuts, there are tax cutting people, and I'm one of them, that won't vote for border until they get all their taxes. I'm not a big fan of the SALT deduction. I live in South Carolina where we have low taxes. Why should people in South Carolina subsidize California and New York?
Well, you just heard Senator Lindsey Graham. Why should he subsidize New York and California, given your high taxes there?
We are a high donor state to the federal government. New York sends more federal dollars than almost any other state down to the federal government. So the fact is that our folks are not subsidized by red states. We, in fact, are helping subsidize the federal government on an annual basis.
What's up, everybody? Major Retired Richard Ojeda here, and Lindsey Graham. Just saying the name is nauseating, isn't it? The man somehow manages to be the loudest squawking voice in the room and the least liked at the same time. But here's the twist. Even Republicans are turning on him.
If you look at South Carolina, for instance, they are one of the biggest recipients of federal dollars in comparison to other states.
That's right. Mike Lawler, a Republican congressman from New York, has taken aim at Lindsey, and honestly, it's about time.
Look, I understand the arguments. I get it. But the fact is that it's double taxation. And our residents should not be penalized simply because, some folks don't like blue state policies. We get it. We don't like them either. We're fighting back against them. But that doesn't mean that we should penalize our tax base.
The GOP is a circus, and Lindsey Graham is the clown who keeps tripping over his own shoes. Lawler didn't hold back when he criticized Graham's tax antics. And let's be honest, Lindsey makes it easy. This is the guy who cries about fairness while crafting policies designed to protect millionaires and billionaires.
Because you're all people that have a lot of money. I know 20 of you, and you're rich as hell. We're going to give you tax cuts. We're going to pay off our debt. We're going to do all of the things that we...
Now let's talk about this SALT cap. For those who don't speak tax code, it's the state and local tax deduction cap, currently set at $10,000. Republicans are pushing to raise it, or better yet, scrap it altogether. Lawler is playing the moderate here, saying he wants to lift the cap to $100,000 for individuals and $200,000 for couples. But let's not kid ourselves. This isn't about helping struggling families. This is about giving wealthy homeowners in places like he represents in Westchester and Rockland counties a fat tax break. And speaking of Westchester and Rockland, let's break down the numbers. These are some of the wealthiest counties in our country. The median household income in Westchester is around $113,000, and in Rockland, it's just over $107,000. These aren't struggling communities. These are the kinds of places where people complain about the cost of yacht storage. So when Lawler says he's fighting for his constituents, what he really means is he's fighting for the richest among them.
Well, you had a very important meeting with President Trump, and I know he gets this. He was a resident of New York, understands the tax policy.
He agrees the cap on SALT needs to be lifted. It did have a negative impact on states like New York. The fact is we have among the highest tax burden. I represent Westchester and Rockland counties. They are the highest property tax counties in America. And so, the combination of taxes is devastating, and $10,000 is just insufficient.
But let's not let Lindsey off the hook here. Graham's entire career is built on hypocrisy, and this SALT cap nonsense is just the latest example. He's out here pretending to care about working families while crafting policies that overwhelmingly benefit the ultra-wealthy. And then he has the audacity to turn around and blame California for everything. It's classic Lindsey: deflect, distract, and deny. Let's dive into this California scapegoating for a minute, too. Lindsey Graham loves to point fingers at blue states like California and New York, blaming them for high taxes, climate disasters, and pretty much everything else under the sun. But here's the truth. States like California and New York are net contributors to the federal budget. They send more money to Washington than they get back. And where does that money go to? to red states like South Carolina, Lindsey Graham's home turf. That's right, South Carolina is a welfare state, taking more federal dollars than it contributes. But you won't hear Lindsey admit that, because that would require a shred of honesty, and honesty isn't exactly Lindsey's strong suit. Lawler is basically accusing Graham in South Carolina of freeloading. Lindsey Graham loves to criticize blue states, but the truth is, his own state wouldn't survive without the federal funds provided by states like California and New York. It's the Republican 10 Commandments in action. Blame everyone else while reaping the benefits of their hard work. Thou shalt bear false witness whenever convenient, and Lindsey Graham is the master of this art. Speaking of the Republican 10 Commandments, let's sprinkle them throughout this mess, because they're the perfect lens to view Graham's antics. The first commandment, thou shalt worship money above all else. Lindsey Graham doesn't just worship money, he builds shrines to it. If you're a billionaire, you're basically a saint in Lindsey's eyes. Everyone else, you're invisible. Graham doesn't care about working families or struggling communities. He cares about donors, lobbyists, and anyone who can cut a check big enough to catch his attention. And then there's the second commandment, thou shalt punish the poor to reward the rich. That's the entire Republican tax policy in a nutshell. The SALT cap is a perfect example. Lifting the cap doesn't help poor or middle-class families. It helps the ultra-rich. And who pays for it? The rest of us. It's trickle-down economics all over again, a scam that's been debunked more times than Graham has flip-flopped on Trump. But Graham doesn't stop there. He's got a whole arsenal of hypocrisy to draw from. This is the guy who pretends to care about border security, health care, and infrastructure, but only when it serves his political interests. And let's not forget his devotion to the Republican commandment, thou shalt never honor the truth. Graham lies as naturally as he breathes, spinning narratives that crumble under the slightest scrutiny. Now let's turn back to Lawler, because his role in this crap show is just as sickening. Lawler likes to paint himself as the reasonable Republican, the guy who's willing to call out his own party when they go too far. But let's be real, Lawler is no saint. He's just as guilty as Graham when it comes to serving the rich. The difference is, Lawler knows how to package his greed in a way that doesn't make it look like it's shameless. He talks about fairness and protecting his tax base, but his tax base is among the wealthiest in the country. Lawler isn't fighting for the little guy, he's fighting for the guy who owns 3 houses and a private jet. And this brings us back to Lindsey Graham, because while Lawler is busy playing the moderate, Graham is out here doubling down on his gospel of greed. He doesn't care about how it looks. He doesn't care about the criticism. Lindsey Graham is all in on the Republican commandments: worship money, lie to voters, and scapegoat anyone who isn't in your inner circle. It's not about governance, it's about grift. So where does this leave us? Lindsey Graham is a walking punchline, a man so disliked that even his own party is turning against him. Mike Lawler is throwing shade, but let's not forget that he's no hero. And the GOP, they're a circus, and Graham is the clown who keeps the show going. But here's the thing, we're not laughing, we're watching, and we're calling them out, because this isn't about taxes or fairness. It's about greed, hypocrisy, and the Republican Party that sold us all out. And that is an absolute fact. Sappers clear the way, airborne all the way.